Hello, hello. So hopefully you can hear me. I think my screen is telling me everything is okay. But just in case, would one of you please just pop me a note to let me know that you can hear me? There's always a few seconds delay. Just find my way back. Ishan, Chanu, welcome back. You guys were here on Monday, weren't you? Oh, you can hear me. Great. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so the other thing just to say is I do have a fan going on in the background. It is very, very hot here in the UK, if you can believe that. I'm all shiny because of the sun. So I'm sorry if you can hear it whirring away in the background, but that is probably better than seeing me pass out on YouTube or LinkedIn. So it feels like we are live on LinkedIn as well. I can see myself on LinkedIn. So anybody who is on LinkedIn and hearing me, please do just type in the comments so that I know you guys are all on board. So some familiar faces. So let me say hi to a few people. It usually takes a couple of minutes for everybody to rock on up. You can see my hair blowing in the wind. It's very kind of scenic, dramatic, isn't it? Oh, you can't see that side. My hair's, anyway. Oh, and you can probably see this big shiny bump here. I've just realized. Don't worry, I'm not a victim of domestic abuse or anything. I did faint earlier on today and hit my head. So that's that big bump, which I didn't realize you'd be able to see on screen. I'd have put some more makeup on it if I had realized that. But don't worry, I'm all safe and well here. All right, so let's say hi to a few people and then we can get going. So Ishan, welcome back. I see you have some questions already, so that's cool. I can address those. Chanu as well, welcome back. Stephen, hello. I'm not sure if I've seen you before, but welcome if I haven't. And if I've forgotten you, I'm really sorry. Who else? Alekia, hello, welcome back. You're absolutely becoming a regular these days, so it's good to see you as always. Tanya, welcome. Dr. Hello. Nancy, oh, hey, Nancy, how are you doing? It's nice to see you. Where's everyone coming in from today? Oh, Stephen, it's your first time. So, okay, that makes me feel good that I hadn't just forgotten your name. That's great. Oh, and we've got Richard Roger Fairclough. Hello. So where are we all from? I'm guessing we've got some people from the US. I usually get people from the US around this time of day. Some UKers sometimes. Abhishek's here. Hey, Abhishek, nice to see you. How are you doing? Oh, Nancy, your panel is today. Right. Gosh, that's exciting. You've been preparing for a while, haven't you? All right. So let's get going. Oh, I've noticed that Dr. is from Louisiana. Cool. Always wanted to go to Louisiana. Seems like such an awesome place. That's on my bucket list of places to go in the US. I say this quite regularly, but one of my big ambitions is to buy like a mobile home truck, Winnebago type thing. If not buy one, rent them and drive through all of the states of the US and basically just eat my way through the US. I'll have to go on a major diet first and then a major diet afterwards, but big ambition, and Louisiana is definitely on that list. All right, so let's get going. So I am Gigi and I am the Amazon interview whiz. I was a senior leader and interviewer and interview bar raiser at Amazon for about 5 years. I left there about a year ago and I now run my own Amazon interview preparation academy. I'm just going to shut this down because I can see myself delayed by 10 seconds and that's just freaky. So there we go. I now run my own Amazon interview preparation academy, which is basically a way I created to enable people who just don't have the type of money to afford personal one-to-one coaching, which is pretty expensive, to get access to an expert like me and everything that I can know and coach in terms of the Amazon interview process. That's public information, but making it accessible to everybody, not just people who have plenty of spare cash to knock around. I also, as part of that mission to make Amazon interview expertise available to all, have my YouTube channel where I guess a whole bunch of you have found me. I genuinely think my YouTube channel has probably the most specific and actionable advice out there as far as Amazon interview preparation YouTube channels are concerned. And that's because it's genuinely there to help you, not there just as a way to draw you into my paid product, which of course I'd love you to do, but the content is there, useful. You can get a job by just using that content. Many people do. Okay. So how I'm going to run this session today is you guys ask me your questions in terms of the comments there. I'll try and run through them. I'm going to try and pick questions that are generally useful for everybody because I want us all to make sure that our time is well spent. I am not going to be able to answer very specific role questions or technical questions or very specific scenarios about interviews because there are 300 different job families in Amazon. No one person can be a technical expert in all of them. And actually, there's quite a lot of deviation within the interview process, even with the specificity that I'm able to give you. So I can't know it all. So I'm going to focus on the more general aspects so that everybody can make use of that. Please don't just say, hi, I've got a program manager interview tomorrow. Any tips? Yeah, sure. 2.5 hours worth of tips on the YouTube channel. So if you're just after general tips, please head that way and then come back when you have something specific. For you guys on YouTube, please like and comment on the stream. It makes a big difference to the algorithm and surfacing my content more. That YouTube algorithm is really hard to crack. So I need your help to do that in return for my help to help you guys crack your Amazon interview. YouTube guys, I do have super chat, super stickers enabled if you want to make sure that I see your question or if you just want to say thank you, which is always nice. I do also have notes for the entire content on my YouTube channel embedded in links in the details of all of my videos. Not this one because I haven't yet processed it, but pretty much everything else will have a link to those notes. So if you don't want to spend your time going through my channel and writing loads of notes, I've done it for you to save you the time. So you can head down and go and get those. Please stick around until the end. I have an absolutely awesome freebie to give you guys that you won't get anywhere else, I promise you. So stick around to the end and I will tell you how to get hold of that freebie. Right, shall we get going? Let me just see. So just start firing away your questions, guys. I'm going to go to the top to Ishan, who has a follow-up question from Monday's session. But in the meantime, please, everyone, just bang your questions out. So you've got an interview tomorrow. Oh, it's a two-parter. So I'll read the first part and then I'll put the second part up on the screen. Oh, do you know what? I've just realized you guys can't usually see that picture there, but you can see it there now. And I'm going to have to tell you the story behind it because it looks really, really egotistical that I would have obviously a picture of myself up on the wall. And I feel I have to justify it because I promise you, I am not an egotistical person. The picture is made up. My mum got this for me for a present. And the picture is made up of teeny, tiny little pictures of my children. And they put it all together. They make it slightly different color tones. And then it creates a picture of you. So it's not me egotistical loving myself. It's actually me, mummy, loving my children. Okay, boring. Let's move on. So Ishan, you've got your first interview for a new role that you haven't interviewed before. It's directly with the hiring manager. All right, I will put that up because you've got one question there. Did they script your, oh, my head's almost cut off by that. That's not right, is it? There we go. Did they skip your screening interview? So usually the way it works, Ishan, is you'll have an initial conversation with a recruiter and then you'll have your first interview. Now, you've had, I know from Monday, you're well advanced in another application. So it may be that the recruiter decided they didn't actually need to do that screening call because they've got lots of notes on you already from the other role that you're well through the process for. When it comes to the actual first round of an interview for a particular role, different teams do it differently. Some teams start with the hiring manager. Other teams start with someone who is a direct report or very close to the hiring manager. So you may well have skipped the recruiter phase of things, but you're now in stage 1, and it so happens that this team has put the hiring manager first. I didn't do that usually because that's where all of the volume sits. And if you're the hiring manager, you're probably more senior in the process. So I would tend to personally not met candidates until the second round, but this team obviously do that differently. So I hope that is useful in answer to that question. I'm just going to cover this one off then for you quickly. So you're saying you still haven't had a reply from the other team for whom you're supposed to be at final round from. So short of going and knocking on a building somewhere, and how you would ever know what building they're in, I don't know. There's nothing you can do at this stage, Ishan, other than to keep sending those messages saying, you know, keen to keep moving on, whether it's to the recruiter, whether it's to the people who interviewed you previously. That's all you can do there. The next thing you can do is nail this particular role that you're applying for, because if you make your way through the process and get to loop on this one, you can potentially use that as a bit of leverage to get the other team moving. And if not, what can you do? There's not much you can do at this stage to get them to respond to you. So I would say at this point, focus all of your energy on the process that is active and moving you through. And then when you get to the point where it actually really matters, where perhaps, hopefully you've got to loop on this one as well, then you can say to your recruiter on this one, very excited to be at loop. I'm supposed to be at loop with another team as well. This is the team. Can you help me sort out what's going on with that group? And then hopefully that will be a little bit of leverage and rocket fuel with the other group if they see you're at loop with another team. Okay, good luck. I hope that one works out for you. Moving on then. Okay. Oh, thanks, Ishan. You're telling me you can't hear the fan. That is awesome. I'm pleased. Although my little curls floating around the place there. Okay. Moving on. Oh, Stephen from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Steelers. I used to be a big fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers when I watched the NFL when I was younger. So many years ago. Dallas Cowboys were my favorite, but Pittsburgh Steelers came a close second. Okay, right. I'm looking for another question here. So sorry, bear with me. Oh, Ram. Oh, I love to do this. This is my favorite part of the session where someone tells me that they got themselves a role. So Ram, you got an AWS technical account manager offer yesterday. Yay! Woo, woo! Crowd goes wild. Congratulations, Ram. I like to put these up because obviously people love to get congratulations and they deserve those congratulations for all of their hard work. But I also want you guys to know it does happen. It is possible. I know the process seems tough. I get some interesting comments on my YouTube channel about the extent of the process, as if I created it, but that's by the by. It's a tough process, but Amazon's got over 1 million employees worldwide, and people do get jobs literally every single day, many hundreds, maybe thousands a day. So Ram, you're one of them. So congratulations. Have an amazing Amazon career. It will change your life. I promise you. Okay. Oh, Jasir. Oh, okay. I've never had this question before. I'm not sure I'll ever have it again, but hey, let me share with you my thoughts on this. So what should you do if you overslept your panel? Any chance to reschedule? So in general, I mean, I assume that happened to you, or are you asking for a friend? In general, yes, you can reschedule. Stuff happens. Your recruiter, your interviewer, your hiring manager, they know that stuff happens. I promise you, they at some point will have forgotten about an interview, overrun a prior meeting, maybe overslept themselves. So for sure, I would just be totally honest with your recruiter. I don't think it's worth lying in these situations. It happens. Just explain to your recruiter what happened and reschedule. But in my point of view, you can get away with that once and once only. You better make sure you've got 7 alarm clocks set for the next time you have an interview. So 7 alarm clocks, 2 mobile phones, and get a relative or a friend to call you. Do not miss it again. Because if you miss it again, not only is the hiring manager or the recruiter probably going to think this person is not taking this seriously, also that will be documented in your notes for any future applications. So you don't want that on your record. So yes, reschedule, but don't miss the next one. Okay, good luck. My neighbour's just arriving home as well. So sorry if you hear that. They usually have a screaming child. So I hope the screaming child isn't there today. Okay, moving on then. Stephen. Is the writing sample always behavioural? Not always, actually. So the standard kind of generic writing sample that is for non-technical roles will be a behavioural question. So they tend to have, I think it's an invent and simplify question and maybe a dive deep. I can't remember the other one. And yes, those are the behavioural ones. Technical roles often get asked to do writing samples that are much more aligned to the technical work that they do. So some people's roles are about writing technical documents. Other people's roles are around writing training documents. Those won't be behavioural, but they'll be very specific to their technical area. So if you've got a writing sample and it's one of those behavioural questions, then yes, that's pretty bog standard and what most people get. My recommendation is you actually approach it you didn't ask me this question, but I'm going to give you this information anyway. My recommendation, and I do have a video on my YouTube channel about this, is that you approach answering that in pretty much the same way you would approach answering it in the interview, because of course it's exactly the same question as somebody might surface to you in the interview. So I really recommend you follow the STAR format, obviously situation, task, action, result. I also recommend putting improvement on the end. You can go and look at my video that's called the Hidden Amazon Leadership Principle That No One Else Will Tell You About video. And that talks you through that extra I at the end of the STAR method and why I recommend you use that. But that's my recommendation. Follow the STAR-E method. You've got 2 pages that you can fill for that writing sample. You don't have to fill 2, but you do want to make sure that you don't end up with half a page, because half a page will not give them the sufficient detail that they need to understand whether you can actually write a high quality document. Okay, so I hope that answered your question and gave you a little bit extra. David, hello David, you sent me a little hand wave, so hey, good to see you. Thank you for joining. Okay. Yeah. Tanya, this is a good question. Does it have a negative impact when you say I by habit or you say we by habit in your story? You try and correct yourself and transfer to I when you realize. Just want to know if it's detrimental. So it's really important to use I, because your interviewer wants to understand what is your specific contribution. So if you use the language of we, it's very unclear to them whether you actually did that or whether maybe somebody else in the group did that, and you're just kind of collectively throwing your lot in with that for some kind of like halo. So is it detrimental? Well, interviewers know candidates often struggle with the I, particularly candidates from particular disciplines. So they know that and they try and be sympathetic to it. But you really do need to try and remember to say the I, because even if you correct yourself from the we to the I, you're still going to, I would suggest, plant seeds of doubt in their minds as to whether that really was your work or whether it was the group's work. So if there's something kind of broad sweeping that you want to say, which is, we all created this, I'm making this up on the fly, so it might be a bit rubbish, but we all created a document to present the case to our leadership. I was responsible for doing all of the research and pulling in all of the case studies as part of that. That you can get away with, because what you're saying is, here was the end thing that we produced, but I did this particular element of it. If you said, we then created this document to present the case to leadership. I created the document to present to leadership. You can see how the difference between those two makes me as an interviewer think, was it really I? Like, what really was your contribution? Because you said we, and if you said we, that's probably Freudian. And now I'm not entirely convinced that you personally created that entire document. If you did say that, a good interviewer who's got that suspicion in their mind would then do a follow-up question with you and say, Tanya, just help me out here. You mentioned we created this document. What exactly was your personal contribution to that document? That would be a good interviewer who digs to try and allay their concerns or areas of curiosity, but you can't really rely on that. So I would say, Tanya, just practice, practice, practice. I. And if you find yourself saying we, don't just flip to, I. You need to be then, I specifically did this element of it. I hope that's helpful. Okay. Oh, Hema. Hello. Good to see you, Hema. All right. Let's see what else have we got here. Okie dokie. Oh, okay, Hema. Okay. So for the phone interview, what's the recommended way to dial in? Using phone and dial toll-free number or using chime? Depends on how stable your internet connection is, Hema. So I always think, and this is just a personal bias, I suppose I'll use the word bias, being able to see your interviewer and have your interviewer see you, I think is preferable. It creates that human connection, and you can see their body language. You know, you can see if they're starting to get a bit bored, their eyes are roaming. So if you can, I would say use chime. Now, sometimes people don't want to do do video. There may be various reasons. If you don't want to do it via chime, you don't want to actually use the video capability, you should be clear with your recruiter that that's what you want to do and have a very good reason for why it is you want to do it that way, because that way at least it manages the expectation of the interviewer, because there's nothing weirder than you being on video and the other person not being on video, either way round. The other thing I will say is, and I have a video about this, I think it's help your interviewer have a great interview. Always give your interviewer a backup number to call you on at the start of the interview. Don't assume that they have your CV/resume with them. They might not. But the worst thing is when the technology fails and you're trying to get hold of each other and it wastes a load of time in the interview. You get flustered, interviewer gets frustrated, and it's hard to get back to the flow of where you were. So I always recommend to people at the start of the interview, just check with your interviewer and say, can I just check, do you have my direct mobile number to call me on in case something goes wrong with the technology? Make sure they have the number, and then they know if something goes wrong on the technology, they should just call you back on your direct dial number. Okay, I hope that helped. Rahul, good question. Is it really important to have super glorified stories? Don't glorify them, by the way. I think that might just be your use of language there, but don't make them into something they're not, because you'll get caught out at some point. But let's say glorious. That's a good word. I love the word glorious. I'm so British, aren't I? Stories for each question. What if some stories are small, mediocre improvements? So my guidance is always going to be, Rahul, bring your best. Bring the best that you have to offer, because competition is stiff. The bar is high. Their expectations are high. The people in Amazon are brilliant people. So you're going to want to bring your A game. If a couple of your stories aren't enormous, that's not going to be an issue. A lot about the assessment criteria is about how you perform. So, if something turned out to be a relatively small incremental impact on your business, but the story that you tell shows incredible ownership and taking responsibility for something in that space of ownership, or if the story that you tell shows incredible dive deep and digging into stuff and putting, connecting the dots, etc. If the actual outcome on the end of those isn't huge, it's honestly not the end of the world. But what you're really looking for is when I talk about big impact stories, it's not necessarily just about the results. It's about the complexity of all of the work that you had to do to get to that end goal, all of the different behaviors that you had to demonstrate in order to get to that end goal. Obviously, it's nice if you can show big business impact, because ultimately they are hiring you to have an impact on their business. So they're going to want to see you're a dial mover. But if a number of your examples are less about dial moving and much more about really impressive behaviors and demonstrations of the leadership principles, you'll be fine. So mix it up, I guess, if you have to. I hope that helps. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Yeah, I've had this question before, just there. So would it be appropriate to share your reference letters with all your interviewers at panel from your previous jobs? No, don't do that. It's not something that they're interested in. Amazon interviews are structured to gather data from you about your previous experience. And the whole process is based on the premise that an Amazonian, based on their training and the questions and the leadership principles, can draw that information out from you. They don't need to see, and they're not interested in seeing what somebody else's opinion is of you. The whole point of the Amazon interview process is to gather their own data and form their own opinion of you. So not only is it not evidence that they would ever use in debrief, no one is ever going to go into a debrief and say, oh, Jasir showed me 4 different letters from his previous employers and they all said that he's great. So yeah, that's evidence that Jasir is great. It's not. They won't use it. So it doesn't really serve any type of a function when it comes to the actual interview process. Where references come into play is obviously if you are then offered a role as a result of them gathering the data and them then drawing their own conclusion as to whether they should hire you and whether you're great, then your recruiter will go and reach out to these people and gather those references then. So it's at that point, I suggest that you prep those people who you putting forward as your references so that they understand what the role is, what the key requirements for the role are. So when they speak to the recruiter, they can give you the reference in the context of the role. But before that, no, don't bother. It doesn't actually have any place in the Amazon interview process, other than once you had an offer, that is. I hope that helps. Hi, Mutez. No, that's a bit of an oversimplified way of looking at bias for action. And I know we had an exchange about the InterviewWiz Academy. So when you take out the bias for action masterclass in the InterviewWiz Academy, it will become much clearer for you. There are multiple different facets to bias for action in the way that there are actually multiple different facets for all of the different leadership principles. So that's one, doing something quickly when something needs to be done, but that's not the only one. So you'll understand more when you have a look at the masterclass, and we'll sort that out later. Okay. Cool. Yeah, Tanya, I was just reading that one. I won't pull it up, but yeah, so good. It looks like you did have a good interviewer who did a good follow-up question. So awesome. Okay, let me just keep reading, see what else we've got. Great question, Ichabodux. Is that how I would pronounce that? I'm sorry if I've made a horrible hash of that. So when discussing failures, you want to highlight what was learned, but what is the correct scale of failure to bring up in the discussion without it becoming a red flag to the interviewer? So I have a video about this on YouTube. And yeah, I think it's how to manage the failure question or something like that on YouTube. You're going to get different advice from different people on this one. I've seen advice from career coaches, interview coaches, whatever you want to call them, saying that you probably don't want to go for anything too big. You want to kind of stick with something a little bit middle of the road, and that way they know that you can manage failures. I kind of have a different point of view, which you'll see when you watch the video, which is why will I be impressed with a rather everyday failure that you recovered from? So quite often those middle of the road ones, and I'm just going to come up with an account management example. I don't know what role you're applying for, but let's just use this because we can all get our heads around the concepts of account management. So the kind of middle of the road example is where somebody says, I'm an account manager. I had a deadline to meet for a client. 2 days beforehand, I realized that we were going to fail to meet the deadline. So I contacted the client to warn them that this was a risk, but I told them I was going to make everybody work over the weekend so that we didn't miss the deadline, or if we did, we only missed it by a day. Client was irritated, but appreciated my proactivity. I got the team together. We all worked over the weekend. We didn't quite hit the deadline, but we managed to get it in the day after that. Client, was slightly miffed, but we didn't make a massive miss. And I sent the client a bottle of wine. I obviously made up the whole thing. I'm not really that impressed. I could hear that every day from everybody. That would be a bare minimum basic that I would expect of an account manager. Like, am I impressed? Not really. What would impress me is if someone actually had a disastrous story where something went really seriously wrong, but they had an incredible recovery. They managed to pull out all the stops, save the day, turn the whole thing around. And then, and this is the kicker, what they then did was they put all sorts of measures in place to make sure that not only did they never make that mistake again, but no one else that ever came after them made that mistake again. Now, those examples are impressive because you don't hear them every single day. And what it tells you is, even in a situation where something goes catastrophically wrong, which I promise you in Amazon happens very regularly. Something certainly went horrendously wrong in my team once. And I read an article yesterday on LinkedIn from a software development engineer who talked about costing the Amazon P&L back in 2011 $1 million. My team actually caused the German P&L a lot more than that, but that's another story. And he explained what he did and how he recovered. The guy got promoted at the end of the day. And those are the impressive stories. What you should never do is talk about a complete disaster that you didn't recover from, because those are the red flags. The red flags come where people just mess up completely and need saving by somebody else. So I prefer the big catastrophic failure stories that have huge, brilliant, amazing recoveries that people then ensure never happen again. And my suggestion is you actually spend very little time talking about how the failure actually happened, and you spend a large amount of your time talking about your recovery. That's my personal opinion. You'll hear things from other people that are different. You're going to have to take a view. Do you have a huge mistake that has a mind-blowingly brilliant recovery? If you do, I, as an interviewer, would prefer to hear that story than the one I described to you earlier. I hope that helps. Oh, we've got another one. Oh, yay, Vijay. So you've been following for a while. Cool. And you got your offer a couple of days back. Yay. Crowd goes wild. Congrats, Vijay. Delighted for you. As I said before earlier, I promise you, this job will change your life, change the way you think, change your knowledge set, change your approach to business. It'll be brilliant. Congratulations. Well done. Okay. Quick one then. Do I think there's seasonality in recruitment? Definitely. Definitely. I certainly experienced it when I was on the inside. And that seasonality is actually less to do with the seasons of the year and actually much more to do with financial periods. What you would find, and what I would find, is towards the end of the year, when you've got budget constraints, quite a lot of time those headcounts get removed and locked in whilst everyone's trying to achieve a particular budget target for the year. So at the beginning of a new quarter, new roles tend to be opened up because budget is more available. At the end of quarters, and particularly at the end of quarter 4, it tends to get locked down. What I do also think happens that is connected to the seasons of the year is when holiday seasons come around, wherever you are in the world, right? We all are in different places and therefore our times of year would be different. But when holiday seasons come around, summer holidays and winter holidays, everything just slows down. The roles are still available, but the actual process, because people are on their holidays, gets a lot slower. So that also feels like kind of a slowdown in seasonality, but it's just that things take longer rather than there being fewer jobs available. And I'm seeing it on the outside as well in terms of my academy. It's getting a little bit quieter and slower now that summer is here for the UK and also obviously in the US as well. I hope that helps. Okay. What else do we have? Just do a time check. I said do a time check. That's not working on my computer now. Let's see. Check it on my phone. Okay. So next question. Here we go. Handling screen share during Chime system design or any similar need to share with the panel. Is there a question there, Stephen? So I've just clicked on it and I was reading it and didn't read it ahead in time. What's the question? Ask me something specific. Kind of not quite sure what you're after there. Alrighty ho. So Mutez, do I think the new LPs are still not important comparing with other LPs? So as far as I am aware, sorry, there's a lot of sunshine in my face. As far as I'm aware, they are not yet asking questions on the 2 new leadership principles. Now, I do caveat that with, as far as I am aware, I obviously still have a lot of contacts in Amazon who will, I hope, tell me when it starts to happen. But clearly, there are so many teams across the whole of Amazon. It's very possible for one team to start and me not hear that information flowing through. So for now, I don't think you guys should expect to be asked questions on those new leadership principles, but I do recommend, as I have from the 1st of July when they sent the notification out that those leadership principles were launching, check with your recruiter, because there are no guarantees that somebody won't suddenly get started, and I haven't heard about it yet. Okay. I see, Stephen. Right. You want to know, should you have a tool ready to whiteboard? They will tell you. If their expectation is that they want to see something whiteboarded by you, they will tell you, and they'll probably make recommendations as to which tools would be the preferred tools. So double check. If you don't hear anything but you think perhaps you should, then just ask your recruiter whether they think you'll need that type of solution. Okay. Yeah, Shan, you're possibly not wrong on that one. Okay, here's a question. Does every loop include a doc writing part? So it's not part of the loop. It's a exercise that you get sent prior to the loop that you need to complete before the loop happens. So that's part one answer to that question. Part two answer to that question is not everybody is asked to do a writing sample. The policy is, or at least was, last time I heard, that anybody that is doing an L6 role or above will have to do some kind of a writing sample, because if you are operating at that level, the chances are extremely likely that you will have to write some form of document in order to drive decision making, because all decisions made in Amazon are made off the back of somebody writing a document and a whole bunch of other people reading that document. So at an L6 level, the policy was that everybody at L6 or above should be submitting a writing sample. Anybody L5 or below doesn't necessarily have to submit a writing example, but there are some exceptions to that where you are applying for a role that has writing documents as a core part of it. So, for example, if you are a product manager, you would absolutely have to write documents as part of your role, and therefore people applying at L5 level product managers will be asked to do a writing sample. So I know it's hard to tell whether you are at an L5 or an L6 level. That's another question. But if you haven't received one, you may as well ask your recruiter, just double check, am I meant to be doing a writing sample? And the reason why I say it's worth checking and not assuming is that I have had a couple of situations when I was bar raising where I didn't see the writing sample, because I, as the bar raiser, am supposed to read that writing sample before we go into debrief. And on a couple of occasions, that sample was missing. And when I followed up with the recruiter, it turned out that the actual recruiter forgot to send the writing sample to the candidate. Now, obviously, candidate was not penalized for that, but it just makes the process the wrong way round. So definitely just worth checking. If you haven't had one, and you know they usually happen, just check in with your recruiter and ask whether you're meant to have one, and that will be a quick yes, no answer. Okay, I hope that was helpful. So would it be advisable to share your personal projects during loop, like a coding project? Only if it's relevant. So don't just throw in, oh, by the way, I'd love to tell you about this coding project that I did. If there's a coding project that you're really proud of and you want to have an opportunity to talk about it in your interviews, then find the leadership principle that your experience in that particular project aligns best to, and make it your example for that leadership principle. If you think it's wonderful and you really, really want to make sure that you get to say it, then find a couple of leadership principles that you can reshape that coding project towards. So if it works and it fits in the context of the questions that you're asked, then answer it. But don't just randomly shove in a piece of information that you want to make sure that the interviewer hears because you think it's important. If it's important to them, they would ask a question that neatly fits to it, and therefore you would be able to talk about it. I hope that helps. Okay. Part 2. Would I recommend to share your personal projects after the loop in the thank you email? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the decision on whether to hire you or not is only based on the data gathered at your interview. Anything you put in your thank you letter will not be considered as part of the debrief process. And actually, the odds are your thank you letter would arrive after the debrief has happened anyway. There's debate about the value of thank you letters. I do have a video on that on my YouTube channel. So here's my personal opinion on that. Sending a thank you letter is a nice thing to do. It is nice to be nice. Manners, being polite, it's all important as a human being. Will the fact that you sent a thank you letter make any difference to the decision that an Amazon interview panel makes on you? Absolutely not. No way. No Amazon interview panel should be influenced by the fact that one candidate chose to send a thank you email and another candidate didn't. Whether you chose to send a thank you letter or not is not data of any kind about your ability to perform against the leadership principles. It is your ability to provide evidence about raising the bar against the leadership principles, which is used to decide to hire you or not. So by all means, send a thank you letter, but please do not send it with any expectation that it will make any difference whatsoever to the outcome of your interview, because it absolutely will not. Send it because you just want to be a polite and respectful person. Okay, I hope that helped. Tanya, I'll put that up briefly. I know it's role specific, but I can't answer that question because there's no thing anywhere that says for an SDE1, we want this many business related examples. For an SDE2, we want this many business related examples. The concept just doesn't exist, and therefore I can't answer the question. Okay, private name. Do you need references? Yeah. Everybody that gets hired at Amazon will have checks done on them. There'll obviously be the kind of the legal checks. I assume that's a global concept. And yes, they will always ask you for references from a previous employer. That's just part of the standard process. I think I was asked for 3. I don't know whether that's a standard number or not. I'm not involved at that, was not involved at that end of the process. But yes, as far as I'm aware, everybody that gets hired at Amazon has to have a reference. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, next question then for Stephen. Is it unadvisable to reuse examples from your screening when you get to panel? Yeah, so again, I have a video on this on my YouTube channel, so go check that out after I say this, but here goes. I always say, try not to repeat if you possibly can. If you possibly can, try to avoid it, because Amazon wants the broadest set of data that they could possibly get on you to make a really high quality decision. And the more examples that you offer to show that you are an amazing bar raising candidate, the more credible your case becomes. I often use the analogy of going to court and presenting a case to prove you're a bar raiser, if you, a bar raising candidate. So if you were to go to court and you were to present a case to the judge and jury that you were a bar raising candidate, you would bring in as much evidence as you possibly could and as much different evidence as you could. You'd bring in witnesses. Now, if you brought in the same witness, exactly the same person over and over again to say more or less the same thing, the jury and the judge are going to go, well, I believe that witness, but they're just one witness. Where's everybody else? You know, where's there only one witness here to tell us how fantastic Stephen is? If you brought in loads of different witnesses, the judge and the jury would go, wow, there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people that think Stephen is awesome. That's really, really believable because there are so many people. Same goes for your examples. That said, it's really hard because you're going to go through, if you make your way through the entire process, you will have been asked, at least 20 questions if you make it from round 1 all the way through till loop. And coming up with 20 unique examples, or even more sometimes, because some people will go through more questions than that, is really, really difficult. So it is okay to use an example that you used in early rounds and use it again at loop. But my guidance is to use it for a different leadership principle. So when you have captured what the question you were asked was in your early rounds, which I highly recommend everybody do. I also have a video about that on my YouTube channel. Every time you're asked a question, I suggest you capture it and write it down for various reasons that you can see on the video. You'll remember what you were asked, and you'll be able to glean from that, hopefully, what the leadership principle they were getting at was. You'll remember what answer you used. So in your rounds at loop, don't use the same example for the same leadership principle. Reuse it for a different leadership principle and practice, re-spinning that example materially between those two different leadership principles. So use it for one and really, really double down on all of the language and the behaviors associated with that one leadership principle, and then have it for another leadership principle and really, really focus on reshaping the language and the actions that you took, focused on the behaviors and the requirements of that second leadership principle. Make the only thing common the situation. And then when you get to loop, even though it will look the same from a situation point of view, it will look completely different from a task, action, result, improvement. And my next tip, and this is really important and a good one for everyone to remember, is if you are going to repeat an example, tell your interviewer, tell them, I have used this example before, but I'd like to use it again for this particular question because it's a big example that has a number of different leadership principles in it. And I'm going to talk to you about a different leadership principle with this example. And the reason why you need to say that is when they then read notes, either having already read the notes from the previous interviews, or if you're doing it within the loop where they would not yet have read the notes of the previous interviewer, when they do go and read it, it won't be a shock to them. It's strangely disappointing as an interviewer when you've had a story from a candidate that you think is a really great story, and then you see that they've already used it somewhere else. If you're prepped to know that that is coming, that feeling of disappointment doesn't hit you, and you're fully prepared to see that example somewhere else, and you're able to then very clearly pick out the differences between how it was used for one leadership principle and how it's been used for your second leadership principle. That's a really neat trick, and I would really recommend everybody use that. So I hope that helps, Stephen, and do go and have a look at that video on the YouTube channel. Okay. This is a good question. Oh, Alina, I'm going to go for that. I apologize if I've completely butchered your name. I do apologize. It's very lovely. Okay, so you have a panel interview with 4 managers next week. Are they going to tell you which leadership principles they're asking questions on, or will they just ask the questions? So in the main, you can expect them not to tell you exactly which leadership principle they are talking about. Most interviewers won't. I have heard since I left Amazon from a number of people coming to these type of sessions, maybe only 1 or 2, that their interviewer voluntarily told them what leadership principle they were talking about, but it's very, very rare. So odds are they won't be saying to you, oh, I'm going to ask you about customer obsession now. Can you tell me about a time when? Unlikely to happen. So it really is really important that you understand the leadership principles really, really well. You've studied them deeply. Because you've studied them, you've been able to come up with really good examples that align to the leadership principle. So when the question comes along, you don't actually have to worry about, oh, is this customer obsession? Because you'll go, oh, I've got an example that sounds just like that question. And you can use your example. It's a strange concept where if you've understood the leadership principles well enough, you'll be able to create a bank of examples that will very, very likely match any question from that particular leadership principle. So when the question actually comes along, your brain doesn't even have to think, oh, which leadership principle is that? Because you did that work before you entered the interview. That work is done. The matching has happened. You'll go, oh, I've got an example that perfectly fits that. And you can talk about your example. So I hope that helps. Oh, Stephen's thrown in something here. So yes, you can definitely ask your recruiter what leadership principles are the key leadership principles for the role. They may tell you that. It's about 50-50 in my experience so far, where recruiters will or won't tell candidates what the key leadership principles are. But of course, they'll only tell you the key leadership principles for the whole role. They're never going to tell you that Gigi's going to be talking to you about customer obsession and dive deep. Billy's going to be talking to you about learn and be curious and have backbone, disagree and commit. That's not going to happen. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Oh, and I mentioned customer obsession and understanding different facets of customer obsession. That is probably a good cue. Oh, we've got 3 minutes. So let me just double check. Okay. Okay. So before I then follow into this one, I'm going to finish this one off for your private name. References meaning you should know someone who works at Amazon. No, that's not what reference is. That's what, no. So a referral is different to a reference. So I was talking about references, which is not obviously, a reference where someone who has worked with you previously, one of your previous employers, offers a reference to Amazon to say, yes, private name did work for us. They did work for us between these 2 dates and their job title was blah. That's one reference. And then the other will be when they want to actually speak to someone who worked with you in the past. So I would have had a reference who was my old manager in British Telecom, and they called him up and talked to him about me and asked him some questions about me, and he was my reference. A referral is something completely different. So a referral is where someone in Amazon knows you, puts your name in the system for a role, and basically says, I feel confident that this person is going to be a great fit for this role. I refer them to you, hiring manager, as someone who I believe is a good fit for the role. So 2 different things, references and referrals. Okay, so we are now at time. I think, let me just have a quick look, see if there's anything else. Okay, I'll do this one quickly for you then, Richard. So would the interviewer take it negatively if you sporadically look down to check your mental clue notes? So I'm a big advocate of candidates bringing notes into the interview. I do not believe an Amazon interview, or any interview actually, is a memory test. So there should be no reason why any candidate should be prohibited from bringing in notes. But it's definitely worth mentioning to your interviewer at the very top of your interview before you get started, something along the lines of, I hope it's okay. I do have some brief notes with me just to help jog my memory, because obviously there's a lot of ground that we're going to cover. So apologies, you might just see me very briefly looking down once or twice to check these notes to refresh my memory. I hope that's okay. And then you've set it up. They know to expect it. They won't be thrown when you start looking down. And you've also given them an opportunity to tell you if they have any objection to you using notes. Again, I struggle to see and understand how any interviewer could justify stopping a candidate from using notes, other than if they're reading off a script, which has happened to me before. But if they're just brief notes, nobody can really justify telling you no. But if you just mention it up front, they're ready, they expect it, and they at least have that opportunity to tell you if they object. If they object, I wouldn't argue with them. You're going to have to go with it. So be as prepared as you can be to live without those notes. Okay, so I think we are now done. So I said to you at the beginning that I was going to offer you an awesome freebie, and this is an awesome freebie. So I always wonder which way around this goes. So if I do this, then like this, the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy. There you can go and get my Customer Obsession Leadership Principle Masterclass completely free. You will understand what I mean about understanding the different facets of the leadership principles and how that will help you come up with the right example to match any question that they might ask you about customer obsession. I offer it for free because obviously I would love you to be able to love my product and buy more. But equally, every single one of you, if you make it all the way through the interview process, will be asked without question customer obsession questions. So this is, if I'm going to offer one, the best one that I can offer to everybody. So please do go check it out. Grab yourself the Leadership Principle Masterclass. If you don't get this link, I think I've got the link in every single one of the descriptions of every single one of my videos on YouTube. So if you don't catch it now, head over to any of those videos and you will be able to get hold of that masterclass. I think we're done for now. I managed to make it through without passing out. I realized there's loads of sun in my face and it's going to look ridiculous on playback on YouTube, but hey, never mind. Thank you everybody for joining. To you guys that got yourself roles, congratulations, incredible. For those of you with interviews coming up, fingers crossed, please do make use of the Customer Obsession Masterclass if you haven't already. And I'll be back again on Monday. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Bye.